Hi, everybody. It's June again, and you know what that means? That's right. Big corporations pretending that they didn't donate millions to politicians who want people like me dead. But aside from that, yes, it's absolutely Pride Month. And as you may remember, 1 year ago, I made my big debut where I revealed that, well, my gender identity is a lot more complicated than I was letting on for a long time. Um, since then, I've been a lot more open. I'm in a very different job, as I mentioned before, which means that I can be a little bit more honest about who I am. With all of that said, um, I figured that it being Pride Month again, it would be a good time to make some Pride Month themed content. And the first thing I want to do is talk about anime featuring LGBT characters that really changed the way that I looked at the genre. So that's what we're doing today. My introduction to LGBT representation through anime. So what I want a lot of you to understand, which sometimes I have trouble phrasing for people, is how frickin' jealous I am for the huge plethora of stuff that you have to choose from when it comes to like actual LGBT representation these days. It is awesome. And I'm not knocking that, but boy oh boy, growing up in the late 90s, early 2000s, having access to that was a lot more sparse. I already mentioned in the last video about Bloodlust Vampire about how they basically used trans gay panic in order to code the big Chiropteran as the big bad guy, and it's just so gross. Things like this were super common, though. I mean, most people from my generation, their first exposure to a trans character was frickin' Ace Ventura. And if you haven't seen that movie, you're not missing literally anything. It's real bad. So, when it came to anime, that was something that I glommed onto right away. I mean, these unique visuals, the plethora of robots, and boy, oh boy, do I still love me some robots. It was clearly something very special and different. And there was something else that you found in anime. It wasn't just that characters were, you know, expressing Shintoism or having way, way, way different outlooks on the way people present or behave formally. Sometimes you would actually have openly gay characters. And even that wasn't necessarily good. Cartoon Network did their best to tone it down, but Fred Lowe from Outlaw Star definitely comes to mind as a uncomfortable, not especially funny gay stereotype. But I remember watching anime content when I was younger and not being prepared for the level of nuance and just the idea of having an LGBT protagonist at all. I think that's why the Tokyo Babylon OVA hit me so hard. Tokyo Babylon, for the uninitiated, is an extremely dark mystery series by the all-women manga team Clamp. Oh, Clamp, that sounds familiar. I should probably get back to talking about them, like, for more than just the 5 minutes we're going to look at it here. Oops. The series follows an exorcist by the name of Subaru Sumeragi, who's aided by his fashionista twin sister Hokuto and the sexy and mysterious veterinarian Seishiro. Well, the OVA is just two one-off dark fantasy stories set in a modern setting that matches the early tone of the manga, but not really the fricked up way that the series ends. It really stuck with me just how interesting it was that the show was just so incidental about Subaru's gayness. Like, it's not played for a joke. It's not even played up that much. It's just kind of part of who he is. It's really was cool for me. I mean, when you were, let's say, 12, 13 when I saw this, I had never encountered a series where a queer character was handled so offhandedly, let alone getting to be the protagonist of his story. It was a really special moment for me, and while I didn't actually end up going to the manga that inspired this OVA until way later, it left some seeds for me and really made me think about what it meant to be queer and that you could in fact still be the main character of a story even if you were a queer young man. Uh, Incidentally, this has nothing to do with queer representation. I just think it's funny. When this OVA was released, there wasn't a whole lot of clamp material available here in the States, and they decided to market the 2 episodes of the Tokyo Babylon OVA as the prequel to X the movie, which I guess isn't untrue, but it's certainly not like true either. The movie adaptation of X is completely insane and tries to squish way too much manga into like 90 minutes. But the best part is that these 2 episodes are pretty squarely about Subaru and Seishiro, and they die, both of them, like 5 minutes into X the movie, and they are not characterized at all. So it was such a bizarre marketing decision. Maybe that was the only way that the, early 2000s anime scene that was sold almost entirely on nudity and gore, you were going to get to sell this queer supernatural OVA, but I just think that's really funny. The next series I want to talk about is one that hits a little closer to home for some people, which can be surprising because, believe it or not, there was a point when this franchise was absolutely huge. I'm of course talking about the Dot Hack franchise, or more specifically, the anime tie-in Dot Hack Sign. It's easy to not know what Dot Hack is nowadays, especially if you're a younger anime fan. Like, Dot Hack had several anime adaptations and tie-ins, but that's the thing. All of them were tie-ins to 7 PlayStation 2 games that were in actuality only 2 games because they were just very large RPGs, and in order to fully progress the story, because we didn't have DLC content at the time, they would just release another game. And so, like, it wasn't like, you could pick up Devil May Cry 3 or Metal Gear Solid 3 and you could still enjoy yourself. But, like, if you tried to pick up Dot Hack Volume 3, then all of the bosses would be too hard for you to fight, and you wouldn't know what anyone was talking about within the game. It was very, very strange. Anyway, Dot Hack was this sprawling franchise that was built around these PlayStation 2 games about imagining that you were playing a massively multiplayer online game. That's right, it wasn't actually a massively multiplayer online game. It was a game about playing a massively multiplayer online game. Except, like, it doesn't have any lag and there's no 13-year-olds yelling slurs at you, so it's inherently better. Long before Sword Art Online pulled this, the TV tie-in Dot Hack Sign decided to set up a story where Tsukasa, a apparently young lad, finds himself trapped in a video game as a class called a Wave Master, basically like a magician or cleric. Tsukasa makes one friend who's closer than any other, and that's Subaru. Subaru is special. She's a high-level player and the leader of this group called the Crimson Knights. She's really well respected and beloved, and you can't deny that there's a lot of romantic chemistry between her and Tsukasa. They really play this up throughout the entire series until finally, spoilers for a PlayStation 2 video game tie-in. Sorry about that. I kind of have to. When Tsukasa escapes from the game, when the series ends, we got a little bit of a twist. Tsukasa, the character in game, appeared to be a boy and always responded to he, him pronouns. But when we see Tsukasa out of the game, appears to be a girl, or at least assigned female at birth. When Tsukasa meets up with Subaru's player in the real world and finds her in a wheelchair, the two of them are ecstatic to see each other, and the series plays this as if they're still going to be romantically involved. Like, it's a twist literally in the last 5 minutes of the episode, but I can't deny that this really struck me. I was still only like in my early teens at the time, but I was raised in a pretty Catholic household. So it was really interesting to have a relationship, not just a relationship in an anime I was enjoying, but a relationship where I was actively invested in these two characters. Like, this might be some of the earliest shipping that I did, and seeing that they still meant so much to each other, the idea of gender and sex and romance was so much more complicated than I thought it was before that point. And I kind of forgot about it and how much that hit me emotionally until someone I follow on Twitter made a post about it because she was watching the series, and it just all came flooding back to me. I think that might be part of why Dot Hack spoke to my generation so powerfully. Like, I know that it's kind of normal now to just have internet friends, and that's a valid form of friendship, but, like, in the early 2000s, the idea of having meaningful relationships with people over the internet, online, who you've never been in the same room with, was a pretty novel concept. And the series handles it so sincerely, and even pulls the partner you made isn't the gender you thought they were, and still doesn't treat it as a joke or a punchline. It's kind of beautiful. Dot Hack Sign, I don't think it's aged that well. It's kind of boring. And the Yuki Kaijira soundtrack is really good. And that's like the only thing that I can unironically recommend it for. The whole thing doesn't even really resolve that well with the overall plot. Like, you have Tsukasa who gets a happy ending, but a lot of plot threads are only resolved if you play a, I cannot emphasize this enough, very out of print, very hard to get a hold of PlayStation 2 game. So it's hard for me to say that this is a classic, especially with how much of most episodes were just people standing around doing nothing and talking about the stuff they did when they weren't sitting in front of their computer, which is an uncomfortably large amount of the show. But I'd be lying if I said that this didn't affect me very deeply. And I really do love it deep down, even if I have no intention of watching the show again anytime soon. I think the last queer character that I want to mention is probably the most obvious one. My best performing video in recent memory was already kind of on this topic, but we need to talk about Kauru again. Neon Genesis Evangelion was a very emotional ride for me. A lot of people, it's an emotional ride for. Evangelion's a lot. It's a lot. There's so much to delve into. There's so much to think about. And even if the religious symbolism is ultimately meaningless, the characterization is legitimately well done. The writing is legitimately striking and still just holds up and has aged like fine wine. Just a couple months ago, Raina and I had a friend over and we rewatched the entire TV series. And I'm not gonna lie, The ending of that series still hits me like a goddamn sledgehammer. And there's a reason. Evangelion's well made. But there's one episode, more than any of the others, in a world of episodes that disturbed me, made me scream, one disc that made me not want to eat for about 7 hours afterward. There's only one episode that haunted me so much that I didn't finish the DVD that it was on, and I instead went back and rewatched the episode. Episode 24 of Evangelion is a thing of pure beauty. Kaoru Nagisa, aka the 17th Angel Tabris, is introduced in this episode. He doesn't appear earlier in the series, and while later adaptations would introduce Kaoru earlier and earlier into the plot, this series, in his original form, he's really only in this one episode. For the uninitiated, Shinji Ikari is the pilot of a biomechanical robot called an Evangelion, and he has been tasked with saving the world from these horrifying, gigantic monsters called angels. But the fight with the angels has taken a toll. It seems to have killed one of Shinji's friends. It's put another one in comatose. And Shinji finds that he can't even trust his maternal figure. And all that isn't even touching on Dr. Tenma version 5.0. Meanwhile, a new pilot shows up. Someone who's ostensibly there to help Shinji. This is Kaoru. Kaoru is memorable, to say the least. He's handsome, soft-spoken, and he's incredibly fond of Shinji. When, after so much weirdness, after so many characters have been obtuse with Shinji, abusive to him, and he's been so abusive of himself, he finally runs into a character who just expresses affection for him without even second guessing it. Kaoru redefined Shinji's world, and it's truly beautiful. And it's also why the ending of this episode is so haunting and awful. Kaoru is the 17th angel, and he reveals himself in a terrifying way, taking control of the second Evangelion unit and forcing Shinji into a life or death battle. Shinji knows that humanity's future is at stake, and Kaoru knows that if he isn't destroyed, he being Kaoru, that the world will not continue as it is. Humans cannot exist so long as he, an angel, continues to exist. Kaoru gives Shinji the opportunity to end him, but as a result, Shinji loses someone who has offered him unconditional love and support. There's this long take that's just the shot of Kaoru being held by the Evangelion Unit 1. The scene drags on. It's just Beethoven in the background and no movement on screen. Just tension building. And when Kaoru breathes his last, it hurts so hard. Kaoru's end stuck with me. And being more of an anime historian now, it's interesting looking at the lineage that gave us Kaoru. If you can't see the influence that Devilman had on Evangelion, I don't know what to tell you. It's one of those your favorite mangaka's favorite manga kind of things. But here's the thing. Instead of the ending of Devilman, where Ryo is left with the consequences of his actions, it's our protagonist Shinji who's left alone and hopeless for 2 episodes. I am always going to love episode 24 of Eva. It might be my favorite standalone episode of any anime, maybe ever. And I think part of that was because I wanted to see that queerness was valid, that so much love and anguish that had been seen in the series, that the most heartbreaking moment for Shinji comes at the loss of a boy. Evangelion's a classic for a reason. It's absolutely worth your time, and I really hope you go out and watch it. Even if it is the dub that I don't especially care for, better just listen to the original Japanese. Akira Ishida is amazing as Kauru, and you get a phenomenal performance, of course, out of the great Megumi Ogata as Shinji. But even I can't deny there's some pretty cool stuff in the current world of Ava. Hell, Casey Mangillo, the Netflix dub voice of Shinji, is a trans actor. And they have been very supportive of people who do trans readings of Shinji. And I just think that's neat. Um, these were some of the cornerstones to me having queer characters in my media growing up. That's not even counting things like my barely paying attention to Sailor Moon because, when you were a little boy, especially in an only child household, an only child Catholic household, you weren't going to get away with watching Sailor Moon too easily. Or all of the gay stuff that they had to cut from Card Captors when they were adapting Card Captor Sakura. I feel like a lot of that would have changed my approach to, well, understanding of gender and sexuality a lot earlier. And with that, I guess it's time to address the elephant in the room? Yeah, dress. That's the right word for it. So, like I said, a year ago, I put out my Pride Month video. A video where I was finally able to come out and explain that I identify as non-binary. I tend to prefer she and them pronouns these days. So she, her, they, them. That's what I like more. And so while a lot of you have known me as Nick for a very long time, and I thank you for supporting me, I'm going to be doing some rebranding, and I really hope that you're still willing to stick with me during this rebranding process. The name that I picked is Celeste, and it's a name that I've always really loved. So Celeste is best. That's the branding that I want to go with for a whole lot of things, including on this channel. I'm going to be working out how that's going to change, like, the name of the Patreon, if I might even be able to change the URL. If not, I'll understand. And this wasn't an easy choice. Obviously, being out, especially right now, is scary. It's not easy to be an out trans person at all these days. If you haven't noticed, rules for like us and laws that weirdly focus on us trans folks, they're getting uglier and nastier. I don't know what the future's going to look like. I'm terrified. But not being true to myself isn't going to help anybody. And that's why I want to be out. That's why I want to be Celeste on screen. And so thank you for sticking with me as I make these big changes. We'll be looking at some stuff going forward. As always, thank you for watching. If you'd like your name to be included among the ones that are scrolling past, which admittedly aren't a whole lot, please look at my Patreon, which, at the time of recording is still patreon.com/nickizumi. Thank you everyone for your support over the years. Thank you especially to my spouse, Raina, who's been the best as always. All of my patrons whose names are up on screen. Archimize for being a consummate friend. Miles and Hannah for just rocking all the time. My co-hosts on Nerd and Tie, and of course the actual play show Stormwood and Associates that I'm so honored to be a part of. and everyone at the Nerd and Tie Network. Thank you also to the former band members of Counter Gank for a theme song that I just love to death, and I'm going to keep using, even if the name isn't quite the same. Thank you so much. All of you have been here for me, and I hope to keep making content that you really enjoy. The next video is going to be slightly more lighthearted, but until next time, much love, and keep on spocking in the free world. Hey everybody, Editing Sele here. Hey, I just wanted to do one more shout out to the folks who offered to get me the footage that I needed for the .hack portion, especially Aaron, who was the one who sent me way more footage than I actually needed. I really appreciated that. Not stressing about where I was going to get the footage meant I got to just spend time crying over how much I actually care about the Tsukasa Subaru ship. Like, kind of forgot how intensely I felt about that and just how cute this footage is. Also, I didn't intend to have so many characters named Subaru, but I guess that's kind of how it went. I like the Pleiades, so that's appropriate. Anyway, thanks everyone for watching. Keep on spocking.